everyone, I'm Miranda Mills and welcome to my channel where I share my love of books. I thought we'd have a bit of a newsy, bookish catch-up today because I've read quite a few books lately that I haven't reviewed and I think you'd really enjoy them as well. And I've also bought a few books that I wanted to recommend. So I thought it would be nice to have a nice, chatty, bookish catch-up. Before I dive into this video, I also wanted to say that I've created a new free gift for all of you. I've made a PDF of my summer commonplace book guide. So you may remember I've done a spring commonplace book guide and now I've got the summer edition out. And this is a free PDF that you can download if you sign up for my newsletter. You can do that at mirandajanemills.com/summer commonplace book, all one word. I'll put the link in the description box as well. And if you're wondering what a commonplace book is, it's basically my favorite form of journaling. I love commonplacing and I explain what this is in my guide. So you can read all about it in that. And I've also included summer quotes and artwork that will inspire you, as well as a recipe too for lemon and thyme posset, which is absolutely delicious. I'm going to be making it hopefully for my dad when he comes visiting later this month, and it's just such a good recipe. So if you're a creative who loves journaling and would like to learn a bit about this type of journaling, which I think is just wonderful for creative inspiration, then do check out my guide. But let's get on with talking about books now too. So I've read some brilliant books lately. This one I was really looking forward to, and that's Mrs. Porter Calling by A.J. Pierce. I have read the first two in the series, which is Dear Mrs. Bird and then Yours Cheerfully. And this is the third book in her Emmy Lake series. And I was really looking forward to it, very excited to dive into it. And I read it when I was feeling a bit under the weather, and it was just the sort of book that is great to read if you just want something light and cozy. Her Emmy Lake trilogy are all set against the backdrop of World War II, and they follow the story of a young woman who longs to be a journalist. She's dreamed of becoming a war correspondent, but in fact she ends up working for a women's magazine, answering problems and questions that readers send in. And at first she's a bit disappointed by this role, but over the years she comes to really love it and actually to see it as being a vital part of the war effort in terms of keeping up morale and also helping women on the home front, so to speak. And it's just such a lovely series. I really enjoy it. And in this latest installment, of course, you get more about Emmy's adventures at the magazine, which has just been handed over to a new owner, a Mrs. Porter, who's utterly ghastly. And Emmy and her team have to figure out how to save the magazine as Mrs. Porter tries to turn it into this out-of-touch, Vogue sort of copycat style magazine that is not at all what the readers want and isn't relevant to their everyday lives during war as well at all. So there's a lot of humour. As always, this is a book that is about female friendship too. Emmy has some wonderful female friends. There's a really sad tragedy that happens in this book too. I won't say more than that, but oh, you're going to need your tissues handy. I definitely cried over it. So, I mean, these are set during World War II. There is heartbreak as well in these books, and this one does have a really sad episode, but it still manages to be life-affirming and heartwarming, and I just love Emmy as the main character. I think she's just an admirable heroine. So yeah, I really enjoyed this latest installment, and if you're a fan of these books, then I hope you do as well. And then another book that I read very recently, but this has actually been on my shelves for quite some time, It's Greensleeves by Beryl Netherclift. And some of you may remember that I read one of her children's books a few winters ago called The Snowstorm, and I absolutely loved it. And after that, I tracked down some more books by her, and she'd written some adult books, and this is one of them. And it's utterly charming. As you can see, this is a vintage book. It's no longer in print, but if you can find a copy, then I highly recommend it. This is a really interesting type of memoir. It's about a year spent on a farm in Sussex and the lives of the people that she meets while she's staying on this farm for a year. And it's a wonderful blend of sort of essays that reflect on farm life and the seasons. This was written in the interwar years, so it's of that time as well. But in many ways, life on the farm is so old-fashioned, it feels like it could almost be kind of pre-World War One sort of era. But it's just beautifully written. I love her descriptions of the natural landscape. It has a real feeling of Alison Utley to it. If you love Alison Utley's essays on farm life and nature, then I think you would really love this book. And it's a bit of an unusual memoir because some of these essays are sort of interwoven with poetry that she wrote, I think, while she was staying at this farm, which is called Greensleeves. And there are also some sort of short stories interwoven as well, which are kind of fictionalized stories based on people that she heard about or that she met during this year on a farm. But it's just a beautiful book about a very special farm in a gorgeous part of the UK. And yeah, it's a real treasure. It's the type of book where I just wanted to copy out so many passages into my own commonplace book. And in fact, I did include a passage from this in my summer commonplace book, which you can download. You'll see there's quite a long passage by Beryl Netherclift in that, and that's taken from this. And honestly, I wanted to include so much more because it's just like one magical essay after another in here, but I had to limit myself. But oh, I loved it, I really did. So yeah, very much recommend that, especially if you're a fan of Alison Utley or writing about the English countryside. I think you would love it too. And then I read some of the books that I bought in London, which if you watched my most recent London vlogs, would have seen me buy these books. One of them was Goodbye Mr. Chips by James Hilton. And I picked this one up because I thought it might make a good comfort book club pick for September, with the idea of back to school and all of that. And happily, I think it does make a really good pick for the comfort book club. So I actually did end up choosing this as our September read, which some of you will have seen already. But I really love this and so recommend it. It's a very slight, easy read. But I think I saw a quote about this book, which I thought really struck home and was so true. Yes, it's a quote inside. It says it's a tiny, catch-in-the-throat story, perfectly done. That's taken from a New Yorker review. And it's that idea of a catch-in-the-throat story that really applies to this, because it is a type of story that just stays in your heart. It does almost catch in your throat because it's such a mixture of joy and sadness in this book. It's about a much-loved schoolmaster who's been at a boarding school for most of his life, almost all of his adult life, and has become much loved and respected. He's retired and he's reflecting back on his years as a teacher at the start of the book. And as he shares his memories with the reader, you learn so much more about him, and that he in fact lived quite a lot of a fuller life than you might initially have realized. And it's just charming. It's about friendship and hope and being able to instill security and comfort in young people as well. It's just a really touching, slight little book, but one that I'm really looking forward to reading with the Comfort Book Club. So yes, I can't wait to discuss this more in September. And then another book that I picked up when we were in London was an appropriate choice. We were there during the coronation, and this is a book about the coronation, but about the coronation that happened on June 2nd, 1953, of Queen Elizabeth. And it was really poignant actually to read this almost a year after her death. And this was again such a sort of heartwarming, poignant little story that will really stay with me. It's such a slight book, but it has all of the charm that you can expect from a Paul Gallico novel. I mean, I love his books, like The Snow Goose, which is also a very appropriate June read, and also, of course, Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. That's such a favourite of mine. But this was really charming too. The beginning of it reminded me of The Fortnight in September by R.C. Sheriff, because this is about a very ordinary working class family who travel, I think, from Sheffield down to London to see the coronation. They've bought these tickets that will give them great access, so they'll be able to view all of the sort of parade and everything, and they're hoping to catch a glimpse of the Queen as she comes by in her carriage. They'll have champagne when they're there, and they've given up their summer holiday so that they can afford to go just for the day to London to experience this moment in history. And the book begins with them traveling down in the train, and you get the perspective of each member of the family, the father, the mother, the grandmother, and the two children, and what this day really means to them and the sacrifices that they've made in order to be able to afford this day, but why they feel it's worth it. And just this opening really reminds you of The Fortnight in September. Once they arrive in London, however, everything starts going terribly wrong. They realise that they've been swindled over these tickets, and it just seems like the day is going to turn into a complete disaster. But in fact, as you read the book, the characters experience these little acts of kindness from often total strangers, and it's these very small acts that end up saving and transforming the day for them, and also their love for each other as a family. And it happens in such a believable way. There's no sort of miracle that occurs that makes them like meet the Queen or anything like that. And the day could have been this utter disaster. But because in the end they all experience a moment that means a great deal to them, it completely transforms the whole day and the experience. And I just loved it. It's such a sweet little book, and I really recommend it. So yeah, that was another delightful read. Then, as you know, I picked up You Should Have Known by Jean Hanff Korelitz while I was in London as well. This is not my typical genre. This is a thriller, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very well written, and it was such a good book. Quite a page turner, although in some ways it's like a slower paced thriller. But it's about a woman who's a very successful marriage counsellor. Her name is Grace, and she's just about to publish a book that everyone is expecting to do really well. It's a book that really is about this idea that when you start a relationship with someone, that person is essentially telling you who they are right from the beginning. But often people misinterpret these signals or don't want to hear the bad news. But in a way, people always give themselves away. So if something goes wrong later in a relationship, the idea is you really should have known that this was coming from the start. So at the beginning, she is, maybe you might describe her as a bit of a smug marriage counsellor. She believes that she has this perfect marriage, perfect life, but she really gets her comeuppance when the mother of one of the children at her son's school is murdered. And at the same time, she realises her husband who is a doctor, has gone missing, and she has no idea where he is. And then what starts unraveling is their whole relationship and everything that she believed about this man and the life that they had built. So it really is a page turner, even though in some ways it's a bit slower paced, but you just want to kind of keep reading and finding out what really is going on. So I really enjoyed it, and it did make me watch actually The Undoing, which was a TV series that they made based on the book, and it had really good people in it like Nicole Kidman, Hugh Grant and Donald Sutherland. And that was interesting because it's quite different from the book, although it still has the same basic plot idea. And I enjoyed it, but I didn't think it was anywhere near as good as the book. I would definitely recommend this more. But yes, it was a good sort of read for the train when I was travelling back from London. And then this is what I'd read on the train down to London. That's Death of an Author by E.C.R. Lorac. This was kindly given to me by the British Library publishers, and I enjoyed this one. It had at the heart of it what Sherlock Holmes would describe as like a pretty little problem. And it's mainly set in Hampstead. It's not your kind of classic murder mystery of the golden age. It's more of a kind of puzzle to solve. A young woman approaches the police saying that her employer, a writer, has gone missing and she can't access his home and she feels sure that something is wrong. And her employer was a very popular, successful mystery writer, but in person he was an incredibly private, almost paranoid man who refused to let his true identity come to light, and in fact made his female secretary pretend that she was in fact the writer of his books. And then he goes missing, and the police have to solve who really is the author of these books, who is telling the true story here, what is really going on, is there even a missing person at all, has there been a crime that's been committed, what is happening? So yeah, pretty little problem, and I enjoyed this. It just made a kind of fun, light read for the train again. So yeah, definitely recommend that one. Obviously, I read The Blue Castle very recently. This was a reread for me, but I did it for the Comfort Book Club discussion, and it was a joy to return to this book. I'm not going to say more about it because we just did a whole discussion on it, so you can always watch that. But if you've never read this Ellen Montgomery book, then I really recommend it. It was one of her very few books written for adults. It reads more like a YA novel these days, but it's such a favourite of mine. It really is wonderful with a brilliant heroine, so I always recommend this one. And then I read this Persephone book as well, which I think I talked about a bit on the channel, but not too much, and that's One Afternoon by Sean James. And I really enjoyed this one. On the surface level, it's a love story. It's about a 30-odd-year-old woman who has been widowed and left with, I think, 2 children, 2 or 3 daughters. And she begins this passionate sort of love affair with a man younger than herself who is an aspiring actor. The love story side of this book, I wouldn't say is particularly compelling, especially to a modern audience, I think, a modern reader. It's not that satisfying because you feel that the lovely heroine of the book could have done so much better than the man that she falls in love with, who is definitely the type to have affairs. And that's very much kind of accepted in this story, which doesn't sit so well these days. But that's the kind of surface level story going on. What I really loved is it's so much more than a love story. And it really is a book that's very much about female solidarity. It shows lovely mother-daughter relationships, but also unusually it shows a really strong mother and mother-in-law relationship, which I think you don't often come across in books. So I really enjoyed that. I admired the woman at the heart of the story. It's a great book to read in May, actually, because the one afternoon that it starts on is an afternoon in May, and then it goes through the summer and the story finishes the following May. And oh my goodness, the last 2 paragraphs of the book are so beautiful. I loved them. That they sort of redeemed some of the aspects I didn't enjoy quite so much of the story. It was all kind of redeemed in the last 2 paragraphs for me. I just thought they were magical. I think I read a review of Susan Hill of the book, and she mentions those closing lines too and how amazing they are. And yes, I so agree. And it's the type of book you really mull over afterwards and appreciate more and more aspects to the story. It's quite ahead of its time in some ways too, because the heroine does fall pregnant in the book, and she decides to continue the pregnancy even though she is not married, and that was considered very taboo still. And yeah, I just think there's so much to enjoy, to discuss. This would be a good book club pick for those of you who are always on the lookout for book club ones. I think there'd be a lot to discuss from this novel. So yeah, I enjoyed that. And then what I'm currently reading is La Vie by John Lewis Stemple. I love his writing. He's such a great nature writer. I didn't actually realize that he'd moved full-time to France now. So that came as a surprise to me when this book just recently came out. And this is about his life in France, having a small little kind of homestead there, and it takes you all through the seasons. It starts in January and then goes all through the year. For me, any book about France and the south of France in particular is just such a sort of summary read for me. I always associate France with summer holidays. I've started this and I'm really enjoying it. I mean, he's such a good writer, and I just love his descriptions of life in this very small French village and sort of starting anew there. So yeah, definitely enjoying this so far. And then what I've also picked up to read, because I've been inspired so far this month, my sort of Instagram feed is flooded with images of irises from the Chelsea Physic Garden. There was a really beautiful garden on display there that featured a lot of glorious irises. So I'm just seeing photo after photo of them, and I'm also seeing all the lovely pride flags and everything. It's just so much colour on my Instagram feed at the moment. And both those things have inspired this book choice that I've also just started reading, and that's A Lesson in Art and Life by Hugh St. Clair, The Colourful World of Cedric Morris and Arthur Lett Haynes. And it says, Cedric Morris and Arthur Lett Haynes, known as Lett, were an extraordinary couple at the centre of the modern British art scene. After studying in Paris in the 1920s, they moved to London, where they gave fabulous parties attended by the cream of creative London. Morris became a sought-after painter of flowers, birds and landscapes, while Lett was hailed as Britain's first surrealist. Together they founded the East Anglian School of Painting and Drawing at Benton End in Suffolk, where pupils learnt by encouragement rather than formal tuition. This is a book very much about their life together. Cedric Morris is especially famous for his paintings of flowers, but of irises in particular, and I absolutely love those paintings. So that's the kind of connection in my head. And I've been wanting to read this book for ages, but it was really expensive in the initial hardback edition, so I didn't buy that. But then this paperback edition just came out recently, and I picked it up, and it's £12.99, which was just a lot more affordable than the hardback. So I'm really looking forward to reading this, because I had read really good reviews of the book at the time that it first came out. I'm also reading the new Slightly Foxed magazine, which I'm very much enjoying. There's a great article in here about The Go-Between, which is one of my favourite summer reads. And yeah, just lots of good articles in this new summer edition of the magazine. So really enjoying that. And then with sort of France on the brain a bit at the moment, I've also been dipping into and really loving this new book, Joie, A Parisian's Guide to Celebrating the Good Life by Ajiri Aki. And this is just wonderful for anyone who loves France and Paris in particular. Then this is such a great book. It's got beautiful photographs, and it's really a book that's about the sort of Parisian philosophy of life, the importance of eating like good quality food, for instance, seeking out the best ingredients, about taking time to slow down and really appreciate and enjoy life. So it's a book that's about this French philosophy of living, and the author has a shop in Paris, and it's just filled with so much like joy and lovely ideas for living the good life in Paris, essentially. And I just am really enjoying it, finding it very inspiring. So it does make me want to go to Paris though, which I don't see happening anytime soon. But it definitely at least gives me a chance to travel to Paris from my armchair. So I'm very much enjoying it for that reason as well. So those were the books that I've read very recently, or books that I'm currently reading. And then I also just wanted to share a little book haul with you of some of the books that I've bought or received most recently too. So I was really thrilled to get the new Slightly Foxed summer book release, which was kindly sent to me by them. And this is called Blood Knots by Luke Jennings, which sounds very interesting. It's a book about fishing, which I never thought I'd really be that interested in this topic, to be honest. But this sounds so good that I'm actually really looking forward to giving this a read. It's a memoir, of course. All of the Slightly Foxed books that they republish are memoirs. And there's a really interesting passage about this book in their little catalogue. It says, "To fishermen, a blood knot is a common method of attaching one line to another, but here it also stands for the ties of family and friendship. Jennings' beautiful and original memoir is not only the story of his angling life, but also a wonderfully humorous account of his school days and a tribute to the memory of his two extraordinary heroes. As one might expect from an author who is, among other things, the dance critic of The Observer and the author of the Killing Eve novels, he has produced a book of unusual subtlety that's about a great deal more than fishing." I had no idea he was the author of the Killing Eve novels. In fact, I don't think I even realised that the Killing Eve series was based on novels to begin with. So that really interests me. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading this memoir, which sounds like it is about fishing, but it's about so much more than that too. So yes, I'm really intrigued and looking forward to that. And then a book that I bought myself is The Flavor Thesaurus More Flavors by Nikki Segnet. I have the Flavor Thesaurus that came out a few years ago. I really like that book and I use it often, so I was excited that a companion volume just came out recently. This one is really about plant-led pairings, recipes and ideas for cooks, and I've been dipping into it a bit already and it looks very inspiring and helpful, so I'm really thrilled to have got this. And then the publisher kindly sent me this book, which is the new one by Hannah Rothschild, and that's High Time. It's one that's set in Cornwall. I always enjoy a good Cornwall-based book. And it says, "Aisha Scott has a perfect life. Home is an art-filled Cornish castle with her extremely wealthy, titled husband and their beloved daughter. But behind every realized dream lurks an unexploded nightmare, and in the course of one day, Aisha discovers that she will be penniless, homeless, and powerless unless she can outwit the international mafia, infiltrate the worlds of high finance, and make backstreet deals with the shadiest members of the art world." That sounds very exciting, so I'm intrigued by this one. It sounds like it could be quite a fun summer read, so looking forward to getting to that. And then I'd ordered this book, Recipes to Reconnect by Anna Boglione. I hope that's how you say her last name. I wanted to buy this actually when I was at Petersham Nurseries. It says this is a book about food and conversations to re-establish the relationship between nature, food and self, with recipes from Petersham chefs and beyond. But they'd actually sold out of the book, and I kept trying to find somewhere to buy it in London. Everywhere kept selling out of it. So in the end, I just ordered it. And I haven't had a chance to look at it much yet because I only got it very recently, but it looks like it will be a good cookbook to read as well as to cook from, because there are lots of interviews and sort of essays in this one as well as recipes. So I'm looking forward to diving into this one more. And then, as I said in one of my London vlogs, I hadn't bought the catalogue for the Rossetti's exhibition we went to because it is quite a big hardback book that I didn't want to carry back, so I ended up ordering it, and that's just arrived as well. And I'm really pleased to have it because that was a fantastic exhibition, and I always love to buy the catalogue when I can, when I go to a special exhibition like that, because for one thing I love to have all the information and the artwork in one volume like this, but it also is just always such a great memory when I look at my collection of art catalogues and realise all of the fun shows that I've been to over the years. So I was thrilled to get that. But anyway, that's my book list for you, all the books that I've been reading recently and my little book haul. I hope you've found some inspiration from these reviews. Do let me know if any of these books intrigue you, or if you've read any of them yourself and what you thought of them. I'd love to know. Don't forget to download my Summer Commonplace book guide. In that, I also have a list of books that I recommend for reading over the summer. So if you want some seasonal reading inspiration for summer, then that's in my Summer Commonplace book guide as well. And I am actually going to take a bit of a summer holiday myself now. I'm going to take the rest of June off because I've actually just got a lot of personal stuff going on for me in June. My dad is visiting. I've got stuff I want to sort out myself, and I just need a bit of time away from filming. But I will still be sending out my newsletters each week, and you can keep up with what I'm doing on Instagram as well. But I won't be back on YouTube until July. So I'll see you then. I hope you have a wonderful June ahead of you, and I look forward to catching up again in July. But thanks so much for watching. Extra big thanks as always to those of you who pressed the super thanks button on my last video. Also generous, but as always I appreciate everyone who watches and comments and likes my videos. So have a wonderful rest of the month, and I'll see you in July. Goodbye.